On Thursday, July 12, Center of Human Settlement, third visit to China, mission accomplished and vision fulfilled. For her journey to China in 1979, reflected the friendship between two nations, a firm bonding, their growing and deepening relationship.
I am happy to report that we return from this, my third visit to the People's Republic of China, with another mission accomplished. From the very beginning, it was clear that the Chinese government attached the highest importance to this visit. We were accorded high honors and an exceedingly warm welcome.
Upon Mrs. Marcos's arrival in Peking on July 6, the brief but warm welcome demonstrated the high esteem of the Chinese government for the First Lady. Top Chinese officials led by Vice Premier Li Shenyan and his wife, Madame Lin Jiamei, members of the Diplomatic Corps, and Philippine Embassy officials were on hand for the airport ceremony. Immediately after arrival, Mrs. Marcos and her official party, accompanied by Vice Premier Li Shenyan, who was to serve as her official host for the visit, were taken to the State Guest House, a beautiful villa in the outskirts of Peking. The official delegation from the Philippines represented all the branches of government, with 3 cabinet ministers, Minister of Tourism, then Minister of Industry, Vicente Paterno, and Minister of Budget, Jaime Laya, as well as the Chairman of the Philippine Airlines, Roman Cruz Jr., 2 Justices of the Supreme Court, Justice Claudio T. Hanqui and Justice Jovenel Guerrero, and 14 members of the Batasang Pambansa, local government officials, and businessmen. The State Guest House is situated in a lovely estate with carefully tended gardens. The complex was built in 1959 on the 10th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. Villa number 18, where Mrs. Marcos stayed, is normally reserved only for visiting heads of state. It is the largest and the best of all the guest houses in the estate and holds priceless art pieces crafted by palace artisans during the time of the imperial dynasties. That same afternoon, Mrs. Marcos met with Chairman Hua Kuofeng, Premier of the State Council of the People's Republic of China, and Chairman of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. It was an unprecedented gesture that she was received by the Chief of State barely 2 hours after her arrival. Their 65-minute conversation took place at the East Hall of the Great Hall of the People. Mrs. Marcos handed a personal letter of President Marcos to the chairman.
In response to President Marcos' invitation, Premier Hua Kuofeng promised to come to the Philippines early next year, and we look forward to his visit with keen anticipation.
That evening, a state banquet was tendered in her honor at the Great Hall of the People. In his speech, Vice Premier Lee Hsien-yuen praised Mrs. Marcos for her work as an envoy of goodwill, promoting the friendship between China and the Philippines.
Madame Marcos is visiting China for the first time as an envoy of goodwill sent by the Filipino government and the people. With her consistent interest in promoting friendship between China and the Philippines, she has contributed positively to the development of friendly relations and cooperation between the two countries. Since the establishment of diplomatic relations, she herself received many visiting Chinese delegations. All made arrangements for their stay in the Philippines. And it was at her suggestion and with her help that many goodwill missions from the Philippines visited China.
He remembered his visit to the Philippines in March 1978 as an opportunity to enhance the mutual understanding and friendship of the two countries.
During my visit to the Philippines in March last year, I was given a ceremonious and warm welcome by President and Madame Marcos and the Filipino people.
Mrs. Marcos responded in kind with the remembrance of her China visit in 1974 and again in 1975.
It was a mission of rediscovery, the rediscovery of an old friend from whom we had for too long been separated. I came back in 1975 to accompany President Marcos' historic voyage, during which new foundations for the friendship between our peoples and a new relationship between our governments were established. Today, I have returned to China to help sustain and nurture our friendship and to reaffirm the common desire of both our peoples that the friendly relations between them continue to grow and to prosper. But to me, a journey to China is more than a visit to a friend and a neighbor. It is an act of self-renewal, a pilgrimage to one of the wellsprings of our culture, a return to one of the sources of our national heritage.
The following day, Mrs. Marcos was to confer even longer with Vice Premier Lee Hsien-yuen and later with Vice Premier Deng Xiaoping. It was the first meeting of Mrs. Marcos with Vice Premier Deng at the Xinjiang Hall of the Great Hall of the People. Deng was the official escort to President Marcos on the latter's visit to China in June 1975. That afternoon, he told Mrs. Marcos that he had very good memories of the visit by President Marcos.
We had several unusually long, serious discussions with Their Excellencies Deng Xiaoping and Lee Hsien-yuen, both of them Vice Premiers of the State Council and Vice Chairman of the Communist Party of the People's Republic of China. From them, we obtained a deeper understanding of China's position on regional and global issues and the urgent questions that confront us in Southeast Asia. Vice Premier Deng Xiaoping volunteered to declare that China was committed to stand by the Philippines should our security be threatened. At the same time, I believe that our conversations with China's leaders gave them a clearer understanding of our situation here in the Philippines and the problems that we face as a people.
The Filipino Assemblyman paid a courtesy call on Vice Premier Ngopay Ngawang Jimmy of the NPC Standing Committee. Chairman Cruz met with top officials of the Civil Aviation Administration of China, Deputy Director of CAAC Zhen To, and First Deputy Director General Xiang Ruiai, who initialed the air agreement on his visit to Manila in June. Minister Jaime Laya, Commissioner of the Budget, exchanged views with the leading member of the State Planning Committee, Deputy Commissioner Ruan Yun, as did Minister Paterno with the Foreign Trade Minister Li Qiang and other officials of the Trade Ministry.
They too have formed new bonds with the Chinese leadership and people. It is personal bonds like this which strengthen the relations between countries and peoples. As a noble gesture of understanding and friendship, China's leaders agreed to help us meet our urgent need for additional supplies of high-quality oil and refined petroleum products, which are badly needed by our farmers, fishermen, jeepney drivers, and all of our people.
Mrs. Marcos took over negotiations begun earlier by separate technical panels on the 4 major agreements to be concluded and signed during her visit. Her visit on Sunday morning with the widow of Zhou Enlai touched memories. The wife of the late premier serves in her own right as a member of China's top leadership. She received Mrs. Marcos in her home on a government estate outside Peking. Mrs. Marcos brought gifts from home, special mementos of Philippine craftsmanship. Mrs. Marcos had of course met the late Premier Zhou Enlai, and so her visit now could not but evoke a nostalgic remembrance of a revered man who had played a major role in the historic transformation of the country. There was one other great man to be remembered. On Saturday morning, Mrs. Marcos paid homage to the memory of Chairman Mao Zedong. The long lines of Chinese and foreigners stand 4 abreast in Tiananmen Square, awaiting their turn to enter the mausoleum to view the remains of China's great leader. The memorial hall was opened in September of 1977, the first anniversary of his death. It stands as a massive monument of the Chinese people's awe and reverence for the revolutionary hero. The mausoleum had been built with contributions from all the different regions of the country by way of materials and labor. Inside the second chamber, Chairman Mao's body lies encased in a glass sarcophagus, dressed in the revolutionary gray tunic famed all over the world and draped with the red and gold flag of the Republic. Mrs. Marcos brought a wreath of flowers to lay at the marble statue of the man she met on 2 unforgettable occasions in his lifetime. over the largest children's palace in Peking, in Coal Hill Park, which used to be imperial gardens in the Yin, Ming, and Qing dynasties. In 1956, the park was converted into a special playground and study center where talented children are given training and supervised in extracurricular activities after school hours. Every day, some 2,000 children come to the center for play or for study. The ancient pavilions are now used as classrooms for special lessons in calligraphy, fine arts, dancing, and music. The signing of the agreements on the eve of her departure and the high point of the visit took place in a spirit of exultation and triumph. Embodied in the oil agreement was China's pledge to supply the Philippines with crude oil, including higher grade oil on a stable basis over at least the next 7 years, and to give the Philippines priority as China's oil supplies increase. The agreement on long-term trade, on the other hand, provides for the purchase by China of larger volumes of Philippine sugar, copper concentrate, and coconut oil in return for China's petroleum. The total value of Philippine trade with China is expected to reach $2 billion from 1979 to 1985. The trade agreement lays the basis for other forms of economic cooperation, including the establishment of joint ventures between Filipino corporations and Chinese organizations. An example would be the forthcoming projects for Philippine corporations to build, manage, and operate hotels in China. The air agreement promises still closer links between Filipinos and Chinese, facilitating their visits with one another as Philippine Airlines and the Civil Aviation Administration of China connect the cities of Manila, Canton, and Peking with twice-weekly flights. And recognizing the importance of culture in international relations, a cultural agreement would serve to structure the extensive forms of cultural exchange undertaken in recent years and in the future. In short, the agreements on trade, oil, air, hotel, construction, and culture fulfill the expressed desire of both countries for more trade and cultural contacts, and mark the beginning of a more dynamic and expansive partnership between the two nations. The North Korean ambassador to Peking, Jong Myung-soo, had coursed a request through Philippine Ambassador Narciso Reyes to be permitted to hand personally to the First Lady a letter of invitation to visit Pyongyang. In the evening of the banquet, the North Korean envoy reiterated to the First Lady his government's desire to establish diplomatic relations with the Philippines without having to break Philippine diplomatic relations with South Korea. The farewell banquet given by Mrs. Marcos on Sunday evening reflected the mood of exuberance felt by both Filipino and Chinese guests. Cultural numbers by Filipino and Chinese artists enlivened the evening, and the sentiments expressed by Vice Premier Lee Hsien-Yuen and Madam Marcos centered on the deepening of mutual understanding and the affirmation of a common purpose.
Everybody to please join, because we believe that two nations who sing together will stay together.
现在请大家跟我们一起唱这支歌，因为我们相信，如果两个国家能够一起唱歌的话，一定能够来。
In recent years, current Chinese leadership has emphasized the themes of modernization and technological progress. Today, China reaches out to the world and, in a tide of reform, has evolved subtle changes that have lent to this ancient country and culture a more joyful face.
Since I was last in China, there have been many changes in that country. There is a marked rise in the standard of living and a heightened spirit of confidence and determination. During our delegation's visit to Peking, Xi'an, and Guilin, the lesson that we learned is that, in spite of its size, the People's Republic of China has made judicious use of modern technology without prejudice to its human and natural resources, achieving a balance between man and his material needs. China has not sacrificed human values to progress, nor have the old-fashioned virtues been lost to the demands of technology, ideology, and international politics. These are the very same humanist principles that have guided us in the new society, particularly in our efforts in the Ministry of Human Settlement, where we seek to coordinate the delivery of basic services to the people, especially in the rural areas.
5 years may seem like such a short time. Against the background of almost 25 years of mutual isolation, the period seems but a fleeting moment. The renewed friendship between China and the Philippines marks a half-decade in 1979. And yet, the brief interlude has seen both nations join in a venture of discovery and learning, regaining on the losses of the past, and looking ahead to a future of mutual understanding, respect, and cooperation.
On behalf, therefore, of my delegation, I would like to thank the President and the people of the Philippines for the privilege of serving our country and our people once again. To each and every one, from the bottom of my heart, for this privilege, thank you. Maraming salamat at mabuhay kayong lahat. Maraming salamat po. And now may I... The agreement signed in Peking with Vice Premier Lee Hsien-Loong to President Marcos.
On the invitation of the government of Australia, the First Lady, Imelda Marcos, journeyed to Australia to attend the grand opening of the Sydney Opera House. On hand to welcome Mrs. Marcos were representatives of the Prime Minister's office, Australian state and city officials, Philippine Ambassador to Australia, Gregorio Abad, and members of the Filipino community.